My parents spent my $180,000 college fund on my sister's weddings like it was nothing. They vacationed in the Maldives while calling me selfish. What they didn't know is I found the text. Don't tell him until the semester is over. I took them to court. The judge awarded me $285,700. Now my sister is selling her condo to pay me back. My name is Finn Callahan. I grew up in a 3-bedroom colonial in a town my parents pretended they belonged in. 2 parents, 2 older sisters, 1 grandfather who saw everything coming. Robert Callahan Sr. was a civil engineer for 41 years. He retired at 68 and died at 79 of a heart attack in his garden. I was 17. He was the only person in my family who ever looked me in the eye when I talked. When I was 8, he set up a trust. Not for my sisters. For me. $180,000 parked in an account controlled by my father Michael Callahan as trustee. The document ran 3 pages, notarized, signed in my grandfather's careful engineer's handwriting. Clause 7 said the funds were to be used for the education of Finn Callahan exclusively, including undergraduate and graduate tuition, room and board, and related educational expenses. No other use is authorized. My grandfather didn't write that language by accident. He didn't trust my father with cash. He told me once, standing in his den with his hand on my shoulder, "Schools aren't a luxury, son. They're leverage. Nobody can take an education away from you." He said it twice. The way engineers repeat things when they want them remembered. My grandfather trusted my father to protect that money. That was his first mistake. My parents are the kind of people who measure a life in square footage. My father sells industrial insurance. My mother runs a boutique real estate team, 4 agents, a ring light, a logo she designed herself. They live in a house slightly nicer than they can afford and talk about it constantly. Then there's my sisters. Victoria, 27, marketing manager at a mid-sized consumer brand. Ashley, 25, lifestyle influencer, 19,000 followers, mostly wedding content and unboxings. My parents paid for Victoria's wedding at a vineyard last June. They gave Ashley the down payment on a downtown condo in September. Me? State school 40 minutes from home. 22 hours a week at an auto shop to cover books and food. A 2008 Honda Civic with a cracked driver's side mirror I've been meaning to fix for 2 years. My parents call me their responsible one. They say it the way other parents say don't worry about the check. In my family, responsible was a polite word for don't ask for anything. Let me go back 6 weeks before Thanksgiving. The acceptance letter came in October. Graduate program in civil engineering. Full admit. Tuition, $47,800 a year for 2 years. I read it twice, set it down on my kitchen counter, and did the math I'd already done 100 times since high school. The trust would cover both years and still leave enough for a PhD if I wanted one. That had always been the plan. I emailed my father. Short, professional. Subject line, Trust Fund Disbursement Master's Program. I attached the acceptance letter and the tuition invoice. 3 paragraphs, no emotion. He was the trustee. This was routine paperwork. He didn't respond. A week later, I sent the email again. Same subject, same attachments, 1 added line. Please confirm receipt. Nothing. I want to be clear about what I did next, because it matters. I didn't call him screaming. I didn't post anything. I didn't even tell my roommate. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and Googled 2 words, fiduciary duty. Then 2 more. Trustee breach. I read for about 2 hours. By the end of that night, I knew more about my father's legal obligations than he probably did. 3 weeks after my first email, my mother texted me. Not my father, my mother. Honey, things are more complicated than you think. Let's just focus on graduation. We'll talk about the money after the holidays. I read it twice. I didn't reply. I sat with that text for a long time. Complicated. Not delayed. Not I'll explain. Complicated. That was the first time I heard the word actionable in my own head. After Thanksgiving, I started pulling threads. The first one came from my grandmother, my father's mother, Eileen. She's 73, widowed, lives alone 2 towns over, and has never liked my mother. I drove out to see her on a Sunday and told her I was trying to figure out why my father wasn't answering my emails about the trust. She poured coffee. She didn't look surprised. Then she said, almost casually, "Your father refinanced the house the week before Victoria's wedding, you know?" I set my cup down. "He what?" 60,000, I think. Maybe more. Your mother said something about closing a gap. I drove home with my hands at 10 and 2 the whole way. That night I sat down with a legal pad and I built a timeline. Victoria got married in June. The vineyard in Sonoma, 220 guests, peonies flown in from Holland, a 7-piece jazz band. I pulled up her Instagram. The caption under the ceremony photo still read, "Daddy's little girl got the fairy tale." I'd priced wedding vendors online. A venue and florist and band at that scale, with a guest list that size, runs $95,000 minimum. 3 months later, September, Ashley bought a downtown condo. 2-bedroom, hardwood, exposed brick, the kind of place a lifestyle influencer films in. I remembered her TikTok. She deleted it months ago, but I still had the screenshots on my phone. Mom and Dad covered the $40K down payment. You guys, I am literally crying. That didn't even count the rehearsal dinner, or the Maldives honeymoon, or Ashley's furniture. 95,000 plus 40,000. That's not math. That's a confession. 2 weeks later, I drove to my parents' house and asked to speak with my mother alone. Ashley happened to be there. She didn't leave. I kept my voice level. I said, "I need to understand what happened to the money." My mother smiled the smile. "Finn, sweetheart, you're being dramatic. That money was always for the family. Your grandfather would have wanted your sisters to have a beautiful day." I said, "The trust says the money is for my education exclusively." Those are his words, not mine. She waved a hand like she was shooing a fly. "Honey, legal language is just legal language. We're family." Ashley snorted from the couch without looking up from her phone. "God, Finn, you always make yourself the victim." I looked at her. 25 years old. Living in a condo I'd paid for without knowing. Calling me the victim. My mother kept going. Something about how Victoria had been stressed. How the market had been hard on my father. How we all sacrifice for each other in this family. I stopped hearing the words and started hearing the pattern. Every sentence was engineered to move the conversation away from the document and toward feelings. Away from numbers and toward guilt. She expected me to cry, or yell, or apologize. I didn't argue back. I started writing things down. That December, right before Christmas, my Uncle Tom asked for help. Tom is my father's older brother. Retired bookkeeper, 64, good with numbers, bad with computers. He was behind on his own taxes and asked me to spend a Saturday at his kitchen table sorting paper. He'd handled some of my father's bookkeeping for years as a favor. A stack of files sat on the counter, half of them my father's. I didn't plan to look. I noticed. Halfway through the day, a Schedule K1 slid out of a manila folder. Issued by the Callahan Education Trust trustee, Michael Callahan. Beneficiary line. Finn Callahan. Box 1. Distribution. $78,000. Tax year last year. Month posted, May. My sister got married in June. I stared at that form for a long time. The funny thing is, I'm the beneficiary. That copy was supposed to come to me. I'd never seen it. Somewhere along the way, it had been quietly rerouted. I flipped through the rest of the folder. There was more. A credit card statement with a charge from Emirates first-class upgrade to Malé. April 27. My father had posted a Facebook photo that week. 3 people in an airport lounge with champagne. My father, Victoria, and Ashley. Ashley had gone on the honeymoon. The honeymoon. With her father and her sister. I took photos of every page with my phone. I didn't say a word to Uncle Tom. I finished his taxes, drove home, and sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes. My sisters honeymooned on my engineering degree. A week later, my mother hosted a Sunday barbecue. I went because I wanted to look normal. I wasn't ready to tip my hand. Sandra was there. Sandra Molina, 50, CPA, family friend for 20 years. My mother's gossip buddy. She doesn't miss things. Victoria was 2 glasses of rosé deep by the time dessert came out. She leaned into Sandra on the back porch, laughing a little too loudly, and said, "Honestly, Finn is lucky. Most guys don't even get a trust fund to begin with." Mom and Dad stretched it to cover everybody. Sandra didn't laugh. She set her glass down. She looked up at me. I was standing by the grill, about 15 feet away, and she held the look for a full 4 seconds. Then she looked back at Victoria. Then back at me. She said, "Is that right?" It wasn't a question. Victoria kept talking. Something about the Maldives, something about how Dad was so generous. Sandra had already gone quiet. She stayed quiet for the rest of the barbecue. On the way out, she touched my elbow at the door and said, "Lo, Finn, if you ever need to talk about your grandfather's money, you call me. Okay?" Eventually, she would tell me the rest. Victoria didn't know she'd just handed me my first witness. That Sunday after the barbecue, I drove out to my grandmother's house again. Eileen met me at the door, saw my face, and said, "You found something." It wasn't a question. I told her I needed to see my grandfather's original trust document. She didn't ask why. She walked me straight back to the den. Grandpa's oak file cabinet was still there, against the far wall. My grandmother had polished it after he died and never moved a thing inside. She opened the second drawer, pulled out a manila folder labeled Finn Trust, and handed it to me. 3 pages. Stapled. Notarized, November 2008. Signed at the bottom in my grandfather's careful engineer's handwriting. I skipped to clause 7 and read it out loud. "The funds in this trust shall be used for the education of Finn Callahan exclusively, including undergraduate and graduate tuition, room and board, books, and related educational expenses. No other use is authorized." Eileen nodded once. He said, "Keep your own copy. Always keep your own copy." I sat with that folder on my lap in her kitchen for an hour. My grandfather had written the case against them in 2008. The next week, I met Sarah Okafor. She was an estate litigation attorney in a small firm downtown. Bar association referral. 2 decades of experience, plain office, no performative art on the walls. I brought her the trust, the K1, the Emirates receipt, the Instagram screenshots. She read for 40 minutes without speaking. Then she put the folder down and said she'd send a statutory accounting demand that afternoon. Under state law, a beneficiary can demand a formal accounting from the trustee. The trustee has to comply. My father had 30 days. He complied on day 29. The statement came back in a PDF 19 pages long. I sat down at my desk at 9 p.m. with coffee and a spreadsheet, and I went line by line. Withdrawal 1. May 14th, $78,000, wired to Vineyard Events, LLC. Withdrawal 2. August 22nd, $42,000, cashier's check. Withdrawal 3. September 8th, $40,000. Memo, Condo down payment A. Withdrawal 4. November 1st, $20,000. Memo blank. Eventually, I'd learned that memo blank was a kitchen remodel at Ashley's condo. Marble countertops. I'd seen them on her Instagram. There were smaller line items too. A caterer, a photographer, honeymoon airfare. I added it all up twice. $186,400. More than the original trust because my father had drained the interest on the way out. I wasn't angry when I saw those statements. I was relieved because anger guesses and paper proves. $186,400. That's what my sister's fairy tale actually cost. Every wedding flower, every Maldives cabana, every marble countertop had a line in that statement. The texts I found on my own. My mother had set up a family iCloud account 6 years earlier for the photos, she said. She'd never removed anyone, and she'd never realized that messages synced by default across every linked device. I opened my old MacBook, the one I'd had since sophomore year, and there they were. Conversations between her and my sisters, going back years. I searched for my name. March 3rd. 10 months before Thanksgiving. My mother to Victoria. Daddy moved the money from Finn's account today, so the Maldives is covered. Don't mention anything to Finn until after the semester. Victoria, 2 minutes later. OMG, thank you, Mommy, Ashley said. The condo's next, right? My mother. Yes, honey, but keep quiet. I read it 3 times. They knew. They coordinated. That text was a conspiracy in emoji form. I brought everything to Sarah's office the following Monday. The trust document. The 19-page accounting. The K1. The Emirates receipt. The Instagram screenshots. The texts printed, timestamped, authenticated through my iCloud metadata. I laid it all out on her conference table in the order I'd found it. Sarah read for an hour. She didn't take notes. She didn't interrupt. When she finished, she looked up and said, "Finn, this is a textbook breach of fiduciary duty. Your father, as trustee, had a legal obligation to administer this trust strictly according to its terms. He didn't. He diverted funds to non-beneficiaries for non-educational purposes. It is clearly actionable. And your sisters, if they knowingly received funds they weren't entitled to, can be joined for unjust enrichment." I nodded. I had already read enough to know those words were coming. I asked her what happened if I did nothing. She leaned back. 3 things. 1, you lose the money. All of it. Your master's, your PhD if you want one, your start in the career you've earned. 2, you lose the truth. Your family keeps the version where this never happened, and your sisters get to keep the condo and the marriage and the vacation photos. 3, she tapped a pin once on the table. The clock runs out. In this state, breach of fiduciary duty carries a 4-year statute of limitations. Your last recorded withdrawal was 13 months ago. If you wait too long, even a judge who believes you won't be able to help you. Eventually, she said, that clock would run out whether I was ready or not. I asked her what happened if I did sue. Sarah didn't promise me I'd win. She told me my parents and my sisters would each have to answer, under oath, for everything they'd done. She told me it would take a year. She told me my family would be gone from my life either way. I gave her the retainer that afternoon. I called my mother that night. I didn't warn her I was calling. I told her I had the original trust document, the bank statements, and messages between her and Victoria. I told her what the statements added up to, $186,400. I told her I would sign a release if the money was returned full amount, plus interest within 30 days. No lawsuit, no court, no contact after. Done. There was a pause. Then my mother laughed. A short, sharp laugh, the kind of laugh a woman gives when a child has said something ridiculous. Finn, she said, you wouldn't dare sue your own mother. Stop being theatrical. I said, okay. I hung up. 2 hours later, Sarah filed the complaint. 34 pages. 4 defendants, my father, my mother, Victoria, Ashley, full legal names, birth dates, addresses. The moment that PDF left Sarah's office, I stopped being their son. I became a plaintiff. The trial took a year to get here. A year of discovery, depositions, motion hearings, and 1 failed mediation. My parents refused to settle. My mother told her sister at Easter that Finn will come to his senses before it goes to court. It didn't. We tried the case in courtroom 4B on a Tuesday in March. Fluorescent lights, wooden bench, a state flag behind the judge. Judge Anjali Patel. Mid-50s, reading glasses, patient voice, no patience for theatrics. My parents had hired a mid-tier civil attorney named Tom Brennan, $380 an hour. He didn't specialize in trusts. His entire defense strategy came down to 1 phrase: family intent. He planned to argue that my grandfather would have wanted his money to benefit the whole family, not just me. Sarah's opening was 3 sentences. She set the original trust document on the lectern, turned to Clause 7, and read it out loud to the court. The funds in this trust shall be used for the education of Finn Callahan exclusively. No other use is authorized. She said, Your Honor, the document does not require interpretation. It requires enforcement. She sat down. Judge Patel looked at the trust. Then she made a note. She didn't look at my parents once. That was when I knew. Discovery is a quiet weapon. The depositions had been taken months earlier, behind closed doors, under oath. On the morning of trial, Sarah walked the court through them one at a time, matching each sworn statement to the paper trail she'd pulled from my family's own devices. Victoria had testified under oath that she had no idea where the money came from. Sarah projected the March 3rd text exchange onto the screen. Ashley said the condo's next, right? In Victoria's own thumbs, time-stamped, from her own phone. Victoria's face went a shade of red I had not seen on her since childhood. She asked the bailiff for water. Ashley had testified that the condo was a gift out of general family funds. Sarah pulled the Venmo record. Ashley had forgotten existed a $300 transfer to her wedding planner, memo field reading down payment help. Thanks, Mommy, from Finn's account, LOL. The courtroom got very quiet. Ashley's own attorney set down her pen. My mother had testified that she never discussed the trust with either of her daughters. Sarah projected her own message. Daddy moved the money from Finn's account today, so the Maldives is covered. Don't mention anything to Finn until after the semester. My mother's attorney asked for a brief recess. Judge Patel denied it. My father, the trustee, had refused to answer 3 questions at deposition on the advice of his own counsel. When asked why he'd diverted trust funds, he said, I'd like to consult with my attorney. When asked when he first considered those funds available for family use, he said the same thing. When asked whether he'd informed me of the withdrawals, he said it a 3rd time. Sarah read those 3 refusals aloud to the court. She didn't add commentary. She didn't need to. They didn't just lie to me for 10 years. They lied to a judge in one afternoon. Judge Patel issued her ruling from the bench the next morning. The court finds that Michael Callahan breached his fiduciary duty as trustee of the Callahan Education Trust. The court further finds that Linda Callahan, Victoria Callahan, and Ashley Callahan were knowing recipients of trust assets diverted in violation of the trust instrument. Judgment is entered for the plaintiff in the amount of $186,400 in trust principal, plus prejudgment interest of $41,300, plus attorney's fees and costs of $58,000. Total judgment, $285,700. Joint and several. She took off her glasses. She looked at me for the first time since the trial began. Mr. Callahan, your grandfather wrote a very clear document. I only had to read it. I nodded once. My mother made a sound I won't try to describe. Victoria started to cry. Ashley stared at her lap. $285,700. Joint and several. My family had 30 days to pay. My grandfather wrote the case. The judge just signed it. The condo sold in 4 months. Ashley listed it herself on Instagram, heartbroken to let this go. But the universe is telling me to downsize, then took the listing down when someone in the comments asked whether the universe was also telling her about the lawsuit. Victoria and her husband moved into his parents' ranch house in Ohio. My parents refinanced our childhood home for the second time in 2 years and lost about $90,000 of the equity they'd spent a decade bragging about. I heard later from Sandra, who had kept in touch, that a county DA had opened a file on my father regarding the trust withdrawals and possible tax issues. I didn't follow that one. It wasn't mine to follow. Victoria's Instagram disappeared overnight. Ashley's did too. 2 years of wedding content, bridal magazine features, condo tour reels, gone in one afternoon. She posts on a smaller account now, under a different name. I don't look for it. Eventually, the Instagram went quiet. That was the loudest thing they ever said. I started my master's program that fall. Grant Hall, room 214. Foundations of Structural Analysis. I sat in the second row. I kept a copy of my grandfather's trust in the outside pocket of my laptop bag, not because I was afraid of anything, but because I wanted him in the room. My grandmother came to my graduation 2 years later. She brought a pin from my grandfather's old engineering association and clipped it to my lapel before the ceremony. My parents didn't come, neither did my sisters. I didn't send them invitations. My grandfather told me once that schools weren't a luxury. He said they were leverage. He said it twice, the way engineers repeat things when they want them remembered. Eventually, he was right about everything.